another struggle than have to have like endure the eye rolls.
Yeah.
There we go. Expecting 6. I got opinions here.
I'll hand these out. You guys can, there's one for each organization, so. Flash drives.
My glasses.
Oh, so everything that's on the monitors?
Should be on the flash, it'll be on the flash drive too, yeah.
Like you've done this before. Thank you.
Like I said, the best press conference I've ever seen is the one you did on the Burger King.
Can I get one too?
Did I miss you? Yeah. Try
I know, it's...
with who? So I got 2 more.
Thank you.
Did you get a?
Yeah.
You want to handle that drive?
Sure.
Yeah, so everything that's on the flash drive is everything I'm going to show here, so you just have your own copies.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I'll wait because it's technically at 10 o'clock, and I think we got a couple more still coming. MLAP should be here, so.
Here.
Those readers.
Yeah. I don't need it till the, I need to start seeing. Are those too strong for you?
No, they're perfect.
I'll give them a couple more minutes of time. It's a little snowy, so I'm giving them a little bit.
Yeah. Fair enough.
I want,
10:01, so, you know.
I've been late.
So, can do 5 after, so yeah, I think it's a good. grace period.
Scoot over towards me.
He doesn't need one, he's okay.
Oh, okay.
Ah, good, thanks guys.
Oh.
Wait for you whenever you're ready, because it's about 5 after, so I think I've given them enough grace period. They can show up late. So if you're all set.
Yep.
Appreciate y'all coming down here today. Cut right to the chase. I've issued my, not handwritten, but my written opinion regarding my final conclusions in this investigation. As you can see, we will not be filing charges on any of the 3 officers, and there were 3 officers that actually fired shots during this incident. And I've shared with you all a flash over the video, but I want to go over some of that video and kind of explain. I think it helped explain the reasoning here. I think. Going to the in-car. Now, positively, I know you've seen some of this. A lot of you have seen this because I know Greenwich Police has done a release on this, but this is the first contact they had with Mr. Weimer. This is Officer Watkins who actually makes contact. At this point in time, they have gotten a report. There's been, AMR has made a report that there's an individual with a gun coming out of Trinity Hospital, and there's also been another 911 call by a civilian saying, hey, we've got a person waving a gun around. So this is what Officer Watkins is responding to. He's right down the street, so he's able to respond rather quickly. And from that, as you can see, it clearly appears that somebody's, pointing a gun at his head as they're approaching. You hear him say, drop the gun, drop the gun. So clearly, right off the bat, you have an officer seeing there's a gun involved in this incident. This goes on for about 37 seconds in terms of his initial contact before you see these other patrol vehicles approach from the opposite direction.
Sergeant Maple and Jefferson. Jefferson, Maple, and Dresden 1. Drop the gun! Right, gun.
Now I'm going to pause right here because where my arrow is, that's Officer Bates, who's the second officer on scene, essentially next to Officer Watkins here. I point that out because this is going to be a key piece of evidence that we looked at. He pulls up, he gets out, clearly Mr. Reimer is pointing what they believe to a weapon at both of them at this point in time. He never turns it towards the other officers on the south side, but they're the ones who fire the shots. None of the shots come from Officer Watkins or Officer Bates. All the shots come from the officers responding in the other direction. The key piece of evidence here, though, is Officer Bates. You'll hear him saying, and here and on another body cam, he's pointing the gun at me. And I think that's what starts the sequence of shots here. So you can hear it here, and then I'll go to the body cam where you can hear it as well.
He's not being compliant. He still hasn't come out. Once again, Jefferson Maple.
Now you hear that he's pointing the gun at me, and there's almost immediate fire right after that. And so clearly, even through on this file, but you can hear it even more. And this is Officer Plaster. Officer Plaster, and I'll pause it here. He's one of the officers that fires the shots. He fires the most shots out of this. I believe, if I remember correctly, there's 6 total shots that are fired. He's coming from the south. From his body cam, the audio, I think you hear it much clearly that he's pointing the gun at me, and then immediately after that is when those shots are fired. And throughout the body cam, or his body cam, or the in-car video that you can hear, there's multiple officers. Drop the gun, drop the gun, drop the gun. Everybody believes there's a gun involved here. This individual is not pointing this gun at officers. So.
Hey, is that a gun? I can't tell.
He's not being compliant. He still hasn't come out. Once again, Jefferson Maple.
Hey, cease fire! Cease fire! Cease.
So I think that's a clearest indication we hear. He's pointing the gun at you, and there's almost an immediate reaction by Officer Plaster to fire his weapon at this point in time. And I'm not going to go through individual body cams, but in terms of there is a multi-view that I had completed here. Actually, the state police did an excellent job here. I'll pause this real quick if I can. So what you're going to see is a combination. You have the in-car video of Officer Watkins. On the bottom left should be the body camera that you just saw for Officer Plaster. On the top right is Officer Zuby, who also fired 3 rounds. He's on the opposite side of Officer Plaster's vehicle. He's on the passenger side of Officer Plaster, and then Officer Carlson, who approaches and fires essentially what I believe is the last shot in this as he's running up. But this is kind of you can see altogether what's going on at this point in time. And then, like I said, you have copies. Just squares are blocking out the computer screen. Also,
Drop the gun! Drop the gun! Drop the gun! Drop it now!
60 Jefferson and Maple.
Drop the gun now! Drop the gun!
1217 Sergeant Maple and Jefferson.
Jefferson Maple, Jefferson 1. Drop the gun! Frank Center.
so down the left hand, you can see that's Officer Plaster, the body cam we just showed you. Him getting out, and then the upper right-hand corner is Officer Zubies, who's going to be on the passenger side of his vehicle.
He's not being compliant. He still hasn't come out. Once again, Jefferson Maple.
So can see, because it gives you the best view and getting all together of what's going on. Obviously, body cams don't show you because Officer Carlson's probably the worst, the bottom right-hand corner. All you can see is kind of he's approaching because the camera's here. What he's seeing from his sights are up above, and this is also smaller from what they're actually seeing. He fired the last shot in terms of this incident, and apparently he was on the ground at that point in time. But from not only his, but Officer Placer also fired at least one round after Mr. Reimer had hit the ground, and they said he was moving around. He was moving around. What they believed was a gun and was still in his possession, in his reach. He may be reaching for that, and that's why those shots were fired when he was down, in essence. So that's, he was struck 7 times. Mr. Reimer was struck 7 times. There are some shots to the back, the buttocks. I talked with the medical examiner. He basically said, there's movement here. I can tell you there's movement. You can clearly see from the video that he's shot, he's struck, he's falling down, falling to the ground. There is movement, so it's hard to say which one shot where or who or which one struck him first and so forth. But clearly there were 7 shots, and I think there were 5 bullets actually, or bullets and fragments found inside his body at that point in time.
So how many of those shots were from the
2, the first 2, at least 2. And I say the first 2. I presume that would be the first 2 if he saw it. But 2, and that was the cause of death, were the shots to the torso. The other shots were not necessarily fatal shots. It was the shots to the torso that were the fatal ones, if you will. The other ones hit him in the leg, back of the leg, thigh, and so forth. So if it was just those, he would have survived most likely. But the torso shots were the fatal shots. So the question then becomes is, well, did he have a gun? And he did not. This is what he had. It's a lighter. But as you can see, even the first time I took a look at it, I'm like, well, it's kind of a strange looking gun. It looks like a gun, but clearly, when you look at it, it's click it on the side, it's a lighter. But if you're talking about at night, from the distance that they were and the way he was acting with it, clearly it's easy to see why somebody would think this would be a lighter in their hand. So kind of look at the analysis that people have a right to use deadly force in the defense of others. And it doesn't matter that the people who actually were maybe in the danger, as the person perceived it, didn't fire. You still have a right to use immediately deadly force when you perceive that it may be necessary to protect the lives of others, and that's what these 3 officers were doing. They thought the federal officer were in danger, and it's extremely critical that those why the shots happened when they did. The shots happened when they did because one of the officers said, "He's pointing the gun at me." And so they reacted at that point in time. And there's no necessity in the law that says you have to wait until he's firing a shot or he does something, makes a sudden movement. Enough is, he's pointing a gun at me, and boom, they reacted. And they did what they thought was necessary to preserve the life of a fellow officer. Clearly everybody sees this and believes it's a gun. And so that's why I came to the conclusion I did. I don't think there's a basis to file any charges. They cannot be held criminally responsible for acting in the way they did. This is a horrible tragedy, and we've talked. I think there's been a lot about mental health. Why was Mr. Reimer acting in the way he did? We did find this document on him. Clearly, he talks about some mental health. He was released from Trinity Health earlier that day. The state police did an excellent job. Sergeant Tubergen was a detective on this, and we were able to trace exactly he was released from the hospital, went out with his mom, went to McDonald's, and that'll come up a little bit later, but this is a document that appears to be from the hospital, but you can see I really can't be violent. He had a mental health history. He was in for treatment. So what was going on specifically, why he decided to do it at this point in time, I necessarily can't answer that because his mom left him about 5:45, I believe, and he was acting okay. He was acting, seemed to be in good spirits. It was the day after his birthday. There was no, he had been in the hospital, but he got out, and so I have not gotten a toxicology report at this point in time. I didn't think it was really necessary. Perhaps he was under the influence. Perhaps somebody took something. I don't know that, but I didn't think that really changed my analysis in terms of waiting, because that can take a few more months. But this document was on him. He also had, this was found on him. It's once again ironic. GRPD, thank you for caring and watching over me. So he's clearly something's going on here. It's written in crayon. When this was written, I don't know. But these documents were found on him. So he, had these thoughts in his mind, as you clearly can see. And then This is a last will and testament. Now, this is the interesting thing because I ate at McDonald's. So the police were actually able to trace him to the McDonald's on Fulton Street at approximately 8 o'clock. They have him on video at the McDonald's. He actually gets a meal, gets something to eat. They don't actually see him writing this or actually getting a pen for anybody. Elizabeth Van Dyke is a young woman. She was not with him. We're not quite sure who she was, clearly a friend, but she was not present. We haven't been able to talk to her. The police weren't able to talk to her to see if maybe he had said something to her about before going there, but clearly he's writing out what is essentially a last will and testament, because that's the back, but this is the front, last will and testament. So he's pointing that out. So something clearly was going through his mind leading up to him being out in front of Trinity when he was, but I don't know, nobody's ever going to know for sure why this happened. And this is just the final one. Like I said, these are all on the flash drive that you'll have. Just a number, he signed it. So it's all, clearly thinking about it, why he decided to do it at this point in time, I don't think we'll ever know, but I think it just goes to mental health and interactions with law enforcement. This is just something that we've dealt with for my entire 2 terms here, and we're trying to do everything we can. Kent County actually is really quite blessed in terms of the facilities and what we have. The crisis center is something that just opened up. That is a huge benefit, but we have, our officers are taking crisis intervention training to deal with incidents like this. Crisis intervention training to the crisis center, we have a mental health court. Unfortunately, the mental health court is losing funding, and so we're limited in what we can do, but we have a number of hospitals. We have Forest View, Pine Rest, so we are much better off than a lot of communities in Michigan and quite frankly across the country to deal with mental health and interactions with law enforcement, but these incidents happen. And it's really a tragedy. I feel for his family, I feel for his mom and everybody related to him, because he just, if I had to guess, I'm not an expert, but he was in some sort of mental health crisis and decided for whatever reason he wanted to do this. But it's really a horrible thing, and I think the officers acted appropriately given what they had at the time. It's a tough thing to, they made a reaction, and given the fact that he's holding a gun, pointing it, and one of the officers says, he pointed the gun at me, they got to make a decision to protect their officers, and that's what they did here. So there will be no criminal charges on any of these 3 officers. What happened here?
Was there any possibility to de-escalate this? When you watch this, could the police department have done anything differently to de-escalate?
Yeah, I'm not necessarily an expert in de-escalation. I think that it was almost a minute, over a minute and a half, because there's about 37 seconds when the first officer got there. There's another 37 seconds while the other ones are saying drop the gun, drop the gun. Each situation's different in terms of how they react, and it's a pretty tense when somebody's got holding the weapon up, or what they believe is a weapon in that situation. How much leeway do you have for de-escalation? Every situation's different. It wasn't like they came out shooting right away, drop the gun, step back, but it's it's a dangerous situation from their perspective. They don't need to wait till fire because they need to go home too.
They have social workers on staff. Any indication whether they have been trying to reach? Because the original call was a guy with what looked like a gun, walking around. So before they got there, was there any indication they reached out to the social workers?
Not that I can see. Not that I found in the investigation that there are any social workers en route or they're calling for a social worker or something like that. But especially you don't know, just because somebody's acting that way, they may not need a social worker. They could have bad intentions. And I think that's what you got to default right away to is they've got a gun and they're waving. They waving around. The EMS worker said they actually kind of pointed at the ambulance. So this is not something where you're immediately thinking a social worker. Those are a lot of times social workers are responding to less violent. They're not going to be put in danger because social workers aren't trained to go in harm's way like the police officers are. So I think given the situation, it would be hard to say, well, they should have a social worker here to respond because it wasn't that, somebody's just acting out of the normal. Somebody's got a weapon, it's pointed, he's showing up and pointing at an officer right away. That's a little bit different ballgame where you're thinking you're going to call in a social worker.
To clarify, the officers came in on, I think you said the north side?
There's the first one over from the north, the other ones are from the south, the 3 are from the south.
The ones that came in on the north side identified that he was holding something that looked like a gun, and the officers that came in on the south side are the ones that actually fired.
So I'll go back to this because this is probably this is mine. Because if you think, I'll stop right here. Yeah, this is you're looking essentially south. Mm-hmm. So they're the officers on the north. They did not fire. The 2 officers didn't.
On the south.
There's a south fire, but from what you're looking at, there's where the shots came from.
Okay. So the officers who had the gun pointed at them did not fire?
Correct. Yep. that's what I said. That's what I said earlier. There's no requirement that the person, they're ducking down. They're, clearly the gun's pointed at them, so there's no necessity that they have to fire first, that it's justified for the others. He said he's pointing the gun at me. The officers in the south, have a, quite frankly, a little bit better position because they don't have to worry about the gun being pointed at them. They obviously have a position of cover, but it doesn't have the added barrier of somebody pointing out what they believed a weapon at them. So that they reacted, they're able to react because they don't have that, geez, is this person going to fire at me and what's going to happen? So they reacted, and the law of defense of others allows for that.
Did you meet with the family?
I did not.
Has anyone talked to the family?
Yeah, the MSP had talked with the family, and
so they're aware that
they were aware before we had this. They're aware there's no charges, and from my understanding, they're not troubled by that. They kind of understood.
The family understood?
Correct.
And he was being treated by Trinity Health for mental health issues.
He had been there that day. He released that day, earlier that day around, I want to say, just sometime after lunchtime, ballpark, but earlier that day, not, and why he was back there, because the McDonald's he was at was on Fulton, on West Fulton. So how he got there, what he was doing there, what he did between McDonald's and Fulton, that's, we don't know. It's very unclear. They tried to, there's a lot of store cameras, ring doorbells. They tried to track him, kind of, and we just don't know how he got there, why he was there, why he was going back in that area. Any other questions?
Does he basically say it seems like it was suicide by cop?
Yeah, it seems clearly. This looks like suicide by cop.
It looks, I didn't use that term. That's the thing. It's, some people have said, you can, maybe it was. It's suicide by cop. You'll never. I can't say that without, getting. I'd rather have something. Could I prove it beyond a reasonable doubt there's suicide by cop? I don't know about that.
But all indications are. He had talked to someone at Trinity.
There was a comment. They were saying something. He was contemplating that. That is correct. So, but he was fine. That's the thing. He was fine when he goes to talk to his mom, and everything was, So why suddenly he's fine? Everything's going good. Well, but he decides to go do this. So I did not use that terminology. That's something that I think I want to see a little bit more in terms of he says, I'm going to go out and do this. I don't know. And that's always tough with, somebody with mental health issues to get inside their head and why they're doing what they're doing. So I did not use that term, but, I tried to lay out what exactly we found. There's clearly he was contemplating something with last will and testament, but then he also says, thank you GRPD for caring. So it's an odd.
Because the chief has said that the police department had a number of contacts with him and tried to get him help within weeks of this. Mm-hmm. Are you aware of that? Yeah,
I was aware there was a bit of contacts. I didn't delve into them, but I was aware that there was, he's had a history of treatment. So as I say, there's mental health in interaction with the criminal justice system and law enforcement is a huge problem, and something I think law enforcement, we're doing a much better job, and considering the courts. We didn't have a mental health court, when I was elected. That was 2016. We didn't have one, so we were doing stuff to try and take into consideration. But it's an issue in terms of the forensic. If you look at the forensic center where we send our people who competent to stand trial or trying to find not guilty by reason of insanity, they're backed up. They've been backed up, especially COVID was a huge hit. But then it hasn't necessarily gone down. And it's not just Michigan; that's across the country that there's a huge backup at the forensic center because there's much more mental health issues out there that everybody's got to deal with.
Thank you, Chris.
All right, thank you. John, I got your comments.
GRPD didn't know